Hi, this is Karen Allen from Animal House and Raiders of the Lost Ark, and you're listening to the Claws Corner.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Claws Corner. Today's guest is an orchestra conductor, freelance horn player, a music theorist, a music teacher, a pianist, an accompanist, an arranger, and a composer. Her impressive resume includes conducting the Southeastern Connecticut Community Orchestra, the Hudson Opera Theater, Chamber Music by the River, National Woodwind Ensemble, the Summer Star Theater, New London Community Orchestra, the Willimantic Orchestra, and the Cortland Chamber Orchestra. She became proficient at playing numerous instruments at a very extremely early age. This prompted her mother to exclaim, "You were able to read music before you were able to read music, yes, before you were actually even able to read." She became an adjunct professor where her motto is, "It is not enough to understand music theory in theory, but to play it, sing it, and hear it for all musicians." A lifelong dream of hers was always to compose. So in 2014, she began writing the story, music, and lyrics for what would become the Fishergirl. Please welcome the extremely multi-talented Hilarie Clark Moore to the Claws Corner. Hilarie, how are you?
Well, I'm a little overwhelmed by that introduction, but thank you for having me, and thank you so much. I would say you forgot Cheshire Symphony Orchestra.
Oh, wow. You know what's funny about that?
Because that's how we met.
Exactly. That's why it's funny. I can't believe that's the one thing I forgot. Doing my research on you, I had all of that written down. But yeah, as you were saying, I met you first. It was actually November 11th. It was probably the fall concert for the Cheshire Symphony Orchestra. And then more recently, I saw you on March 24th doing the Cheshire Symphony Orchestra spring concert.
Yes. Yeah.
So since I first met you conducting, I mean, I went through your resume, and you've done so much. I want to start with your conducting. So what makes one a great conductor?
I'm not sure that there's a right answer. I think that there's got to be some passion in music. But you also have to have the experience, and you have to have the education and the knowledge to go behind it. We can laugh about all my different twists and turns of how I became a conductor, but it was certainly not planned. And I had, you can go back, but a performance degree, an academic degree, and I was really just trying to figure out what I was to do. And it was an adjunct at SUNY Orange, in Middletown, New York. And I kept wanting more classes, and there was just not an opportunity to, become more than an adjunct and have a full-time position. So I kept going into the head of the department and said, "All right, I've taught this. Can you give me something else?" And at the time, it was Rich Hepner, who was the head of Arts and Communication Department. He said, "Well, look, this is several years ago. I have these two pink slips from telephone messages saying, I've got a bassoonist and I have a violinist. They want to join an orchestra. Why don't you join an orchestra?" And at the time I said, "Well, why not?" And I walked out of his office and I was like, what did I just agree to? I had very few skills. I was a conductor. I had never done it, and I was just looking for another challenge. And I started, instead of going right into conducting an orchestra, because you have to build, you have to recruit, I started out with 2 or 3 chamber groups, and that was, much more comfortable for me. And then I think by the end of the year, I was putting us all together and accompanying the chorus with the Hallelujah chorus, from Messiah. And then I sort of got the bug. And then I realized, don't really have the skills. So I went and got some conducting lessons from Ron DeFazzi, who's artistic director of Hudson Opera Theater. And I worked with him for 20 years. And yes, I could have gone back to a university, conservatory, and gotten an education, but I had my lab. I had an orchestra to work with. A lot of times when you take, conducting lessons, you might get a couple hours a week or semester in front of a real orchestra. And I had it every week. So it was proved really, well for me. But you asked not how did I get into conducting, but what makes a good conductor. I think the general basis is to desire to convey your passion of music, but also to be a music teacher. You have to know more than the musicians. You have to know more about, you have to have an interpretation, and you have to have something to offer the musicians for them to want to come and play. Otherwise, they could just stay home and put on a CD or get a link off the internet and play along. So you have to be able to offer something. And I think you also have to have really good leadership qualities, so that, there's not mutiny in your ranks, and you do it in a very, good way. And if you're knowledgeable about your craft and you've honed your craft, it's really a good experience.
That was perfect answer. I love that. And you know what I love about you is that you just jumped right into it. You're like, what am I getting myself into? Don't even think about it, just do it. And that's, to me, I've always had that mentality, and I just, so many doors have opened for all the different things I've done because I said, I never say no. Yeah, let's try it out. And I love what you said about the conductor making it their own and, making it fun. I recently have been seeing a lot of symphonies. I saw the Waterbury Symphony, I saw the New Jersey Symphony twice, and I saw the Hartford Symphony Orchestra. And in New Jersey recently, I heard it pronounced two different ways, either Nimi Yarvi or Nami Yarvi.
Do it.
Okay, well, anyway, so he's a very famous conductor. And what happened was I found out about him was there was a documentary called Maestro about Pavo, Yarvi, his son. So I said, I've got to check this out. But he made it so much fun. He has a personality on stage similar to you, because I could tell you have a great sense of humor and you make it fun. And you even say in your bio, you want to make it fun. And he did the same thing too. And it was funny. So many people were afraid to clap, didn't know what to do. And then he'd get really quiet and just go, and then the whole crowd go crazy. It was just, he did Tchaikovsky. And it was such a fun musical number that he did. And he did like 2 or 3 different ones from Tchaikovsky. So do you have a favorite composer that you like to conduct?
My favorite composer is Brahms, and a lot of the pieces that I would really like to conduct are a little bit out of stretch for the community orchestras that I've been conducting. And again, in the best scenario is that you challenge the orchestra to do something outside of the comfort zone and just a little bit further, but it's got to be achievable. So I really love the late romantics and the early 20th century pieces, but with that you get larger percussions, your strings go higher, you need more brass, more qualified. And so I do a smidgen of that. My dream would be, to do all the Brahms symphonies.
Yeah, that's a very good choice. I think the most fun, I'm not a connoisseur on the composers, but one of my favorites, because I think he's just so much fun, is Mozart. He's just full of life. I love his music. And, I've seen Mahler's Fifth, I've seen Mozart's 40th recently, some Beethoven, Vivaldi. And I just love that. It seems like, obviously the music fits with his personality. If you don't watch the movie Amadeus, read some biographies. His life is way more interesting than that movie. And
don't watch the movie.
Yeah, I like the movie for what it is, but it's a work of fiction. I read several biographies, probably in the late 80s, early 90s, and I said, why don't they make a movie based on his real life? Because his real life is so much more interesting. So, but I do like your choice as well. It's another symphony I saw. I went to New Jersey several times. I saw the Best of John Williams, and the conductor they had that night was the third conductor, actually. So the first one had COVID, the second one was sick. So the question I have for you regarding that, is it similar to a play? Do they have an understudy? So say if you got sick and you had the concert 2 days from now, would somebody come in and say, all right, I got this, and they would know what to do?
No. And it's a dangerous situation. I have been very fortunate to have an incredible immune system that I don't get sick very often. And I actually have never missed a rehearsal in over 25 years of conducting from being sick, which is amazing. And I took COVID very seriously. There's lots of reasons why everyone says, oh, you don't want to get sick. But I was like, you can't have me go down. Because otherwise you will not have a concert or you will not have a rehearsal. Every once in a while I'll be taking an audition, or actually have a personal reason where my daughter's getting married and I will have somebody cover for me for rehearsal. But I think this is the 3rd time it's coming up, May 1, out of over 25 years of rehearsals. So
that is very impressive.
Well, there's got to be something about I must actually have to love it, or must just be dedicated that, you have a job, you do it, and it's different. I think if I was a musician and playing in the orchestra, that maybe I could get a substitute. But the conductor is a little harder. And, you have another conductor come in, and the cool thing is they're going to have a different interpretation. The bad thing is they're going to have a different interpretation. So, yeah.
One of the things that impressed me is during New Jersey Symphony, during intermission, you get a chance to speak with some of the musicians. I had a chance to talk to some of them, and they were saying that this was for the Tchaikovsky, and they said they only had 4 rehearsals. That was it. And I was watching a documentary on film composers, and they were talking to John Williams, and he worked with the London Symphony Orchestra while recording Empire Strikes Back. And they said, well, how long have you been rehearsing this? He goes, no, this is the first time the musicians saw the notes. So for you, what's a normal rehearsal time?
Okay, so very true. Professional groups, 3 rehearsals maybe, and that's it. Even for putting some operas together, and it's very short. It's not what people think. I conduct community orchestras, so what takes professionals 3 rehearsals will take me approximately 9, depending if it's a truly classical concert, or if it's a holiday or pops, maybe 5 to 7 rehearsals. So we may not achieve the same level of technical prowess on our playing, but we'll have at least a lot of fun in the interpretation and passion in the music. But it will take 9 rehearsals, 9 rehearsals 1 week apart, so there's some practicing time. And I'm just so thrilled to have musicians come and dedicate 1 night a week or whatever to come play with me. And again, I have 2 orchestras, so I have 2 nights of rehearsing, and that's fun because there's 2 different kinds of 2 different programs. So I put my Monday hat on, and I put my Wednesday hat on, and then I go and make sure I bring the right music. So
do you have longtime musicians? Because when I was speaking with some of the musicians in New Jersey, they said, oh, I've been with this orchestra for 35 years. Oh, I've been here 15 years. So it seems that with some of the other ones I've spoken with, they've had some longevity.
Yeah. Well, when I was back in SUNY Orange, where I conducted for 20 years, I had some people that were with me for the full 20 years. I have been with Cheshire Symphony Orchestra since the fall of 2015, and I would say I must have 2/3 or 3/4 of the same musicians. There's not much turnaround. Some of the musicians, particularly the winds and brass, know that their position is other people would jump at the opportunity to have it if they went there, so they're going to continue with it. The new orchestra, Southeastern Connecticut Community Orchestra, or SECO, is new as of September. We had a couple of reading sessions in the spring, and they're already at 55 musicians, and it keeps growing. It's just a wonderful experience. But again, I think we've got a retention rate of like 99%. And only ones that are leaving are moving, and the commute is too far. So
well, what I love, because it's probably they have the same passion as you do. They love the music, they love what they do, and it definitely shows. I've seen the Cheshire, I've never seen the SECO. So I would definitely know what's the difference between the Cheshire Symphony Orchestra and the other one, like the kind of music that you play.
Actually, they have different strengths, but they both put on 4 concerts in a year, 2 classical, a holiday, and pops. SECO is, putting out some questionnaire to see if that's what people want to continue. I know Cheshire loves it. The holiday and pops concert will draw in a little bit of a different audience than the classical ones. It also will give our brass the opportunity to have a little bit more stuff, because some of the orchestra that we are doing doesn't feature brass as much. And then they have different strengths, and it's very interesting. Many some of the same issues, but different strengths. And I just had, an interesting experience where I conducted one piece at one group, and I was expecting them to be like the other group, and I had to, on the spot, change my conducting because their needs were different, or their strengths were different. And that was an interesting experience, because it was like 2 days apart playing the same music.
Yeah. This always interests me. Now, as a conductor, do you see every note, like all the notes to every musician's playing. So when you're looking at the sheet for you, because I know each musician has what they're playing. So what do you see while you're conducting?
Oh, absolutely. The score. I once had a funny conversation. I had moved here to Connecticut and I was stuck at the motor vehicle department for hours. And, you know, and again, people bring books. I brought a score and I was just turning it as if I was reading it. And some lady said, "Do you really actually hear all that?" I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. And I was in whatever the orchestra, program it was. Yeah, you get to read a score, you get to read the different clefs. I'm a horn player, so I transpose easily, and that bugs a lot of people because I just can do it. I have really good ears. So yeah, I read a score like somebody would read a book. And sometimes if I haven't listened to a piece, it's almost like you have that excitement of what's on the next page, like you have in a book. It's like, where is the composer going to go? And I find that sometimes even for my private teaching, if somebody brings in a piece I don't know well, I'm like, I get really excited. Oh, that was really cool. And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be teaching, but I got excited about the music. So
Well, I think that's what makes it so much fun for you, because even though these songs, I mean, these compositions have been around forever,
yeah.
they're still fresh to you, and you still make it
Yep.
fun and exciting. So the question I have for you is then, you do 9 rehearsals approximately with the symphony, how long before do you look at to get yourself acclimated with it so you become so proficient at it that you could just conduct without having to worry about, like, I don't want to mess up, I want to make sure I know everything.
I think it's like peeling an onion. I think it's very much like if you were a person, a clergy member who was given the same liturgy to look at, that you could come back to the same passage and then you have to sermonize it, and you did the same passage 3 years ago, but now you're a different person and you know it differently, and you're going to come from a different angle, and then you might do it again. I have to do programming that I love or will love. Sometimes I get a piece and I have to figure out what I like about it. So there's pieces that I do that are new, and that's always exciting for me. And then I also like to return to pieces that I've done a couple times, and sometimes, just for practical reasons, you sort of want to ease up and like, yeah, I know this symphony, and then I'm going to put harder stuff in the program for me to know, and you balance it. I generally like to have my programming for the next season done by May. So my summer is, if you ever saw, like, I am going to learn this symphony this week, and the next symphony, this overture, and you'll see it. And it's a way of just managing my time so that when rehearsal comes around, I can do the rehearsal schedule, know what to expect. But also I have other things that I do in my life, so I can't just prepare a score the entire night, a entire day or a couple of days, and have that be my only job. So there is a lot of preparation. I still learn things. And it's also not just knowing the literature, but actually responding right at the moment. And you're like, well, do you actually conduct the beautiful melodic line? No, and you can, but you can also put down fires like, oops, this section over here needs a little help on this, and let me do that. And so you have to know that literature well so that you can respond as well as in a concert situation, or obviously to prepare the rehearsals. And yes, I can certainly memorize a score and show off, but I think with a community orchestra, it's really good to have that just in case you have to say, do some putting out fires.
So I'm guessing you're the one that picks out what they're going to play.
Oh, I give all the musicians an opportunity to give me suggestions, and I love having the suggestions because sometimes it shows, hey, I actually want to do this really hard literature, or I like to do of something particular style or something like that. But on the other hand, with both of my community orchestras, they can't do Retta Spring, Shostakovich 5, Mahler 5. And I really enjoy these suggestions by these musicians, I'm like, this is great. They have aspirations, and again, when I say we can't do it now, maybe in 5 or 10 years we can. But it's nice to see where their mind is and where their passion is. And usually it's a piece that, I would think is a little bit, different. And once in a while, there's a piece that I don't know, and somebody introduces it to me. And that's also a thrill. And that's like, ooh, it's like a gem. Let me go listen to this. And then, I'll say whether it's applicable or not. So,
Speaking of Mahler 5, did you see the movie Tar?
Yes.
Right. Well, what's your opinion? The reason I'm asking this, I know it's a fictional movie, but I was reading of all the different conductors that were so angry with this because that's not real. And somebody made a comment like, if you want reality, watch a documentary. I personally loved the movie, and I loved how deep Kate Blanchett went into character, because she was saying that she actually learned how to play piano, she learned German, and she learned a little bit of conducting. So what's your opinion in that movie?
All right. So yeah, I'm part of the Internationals Guild, and yes, just like Mozart in the Jungle, everything is exaggerated, and that makes shows. And I thought the acting was wonderful. And I think there was a couple, some dialogue that I really liked in the beginning. But no, I didn't like it because I thought that there was a lot of different tangents that they could have gone down, and they only superficially did it. So to read it, it's about power plays, and certainly, but there was also a mental health issue, and there's issues of, would I ever have a partner or spouse being concertmaster with me conducting? Never. And nepotism. I mean, there was just a lot of different tangents that I think that I hope someone's not going to get offended that you could have gone down, and I didn't think that all the strings were tied up at the end, but I thought the acting was wonderful.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying, because Todd Fields, who directed it, throws a lot at you. I mean, there's so much going on, but I did love it because, it was a 2-hour and 40-minute movie, so there was a lot in there, but it's just like, it was sort of like, I compared it to The Shining. She starts off on the top and just slowly descends into madness. And to me, without giving anything away, I know it's been out for a while, but the ending, I love the ending, because it's just, first I'm like, how did she get, without getting into it, it's just, then I see where she was. So
she really hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
That's all.
One thing they brought up in, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say is there are some great female conductors, and I think we have to be careful a little bit, because it's hard, the gender stuff. And it's a field, and there's a lot of women that are great conductors. And again, I'm just, I like to see really good examples of great conductors that are professionally on and off the podium.
No, I definitely see that. And that's why I as I mentioned before, I love the symphony. I have something called the Symphony Channel, and they have all these different symphonies. They have interviews with people. So I watch so much, and I enjoy it. But again, I'm hoping most people know that the movie was a work of fiction. And but there was something in the movie I want to bring up that I'm curious of your opinion, because they talk about how Beethoven's Ninth ripped off Mozart's 40th. I personally cannot hear it at all. They said there's 29 notes that were similar. And what's your opinion on that?
I'm not going to go there.
Okay.
Because I am now composing, and I will sit at the piano, and some ideas will come around, and then I still sort of go into a tune that everyone knows, and 76 trombones going around or something like that. And in my composing, in one of the songs for Fishergirl, had a sentiment, for 2 or 3 measures, it really sounded like One Hand, One Heart, from West Side Story. And, I changed it, but I did have to have somebody say, hey, that's like the same passage. And I think that there's just so many combinations of songs, and, as long as it, I would say sometimes it's hard, to distinguish, to make sure that you don't ever do any combination that was ever done before. So 29 measures. I mean, I will always say, I think I hear a little bit of the Superman theme, and, Don Juan's music.
Hmm.
And it's like, yeah, that's pretty much it. But yeah, I'm not going to go between Mozart 40th and
Okay.
the 9th.
Well, I personally love both of them, and I don't want to pick.
Yeah.
I was just curious because I watched the movie several times, and the first time I saw the movie, I said, "Let me check that out." And I listened to it, and I listened to the ninth. I said, "I really don't see it," but then I just said what you said. I like them both, and it's so hard when you like so many different kinds of music not to be inspired by something, and you're not
Mhm.
actually ripping it off, but you're inspired by it, and without even
Yeah.
realizing it. So I think there's a lot of that. It's not plagiarism when you're doing it inadvertently. I don't think. I mean, if
But
there,
if
what was
it's
that?
pointed out, I'll take it out.
Oh yeah, no, which I love
Yeah.
about that because you're like, oh, I didn't realize that. Yeah, let me take that out. Question for you: when you see the notes, what does a drummer's note look like to you?
Percussion is probably my weakest of all the orchestra, and I probably don't have all the words. I find it fascinating because I am conducting Britain's guide, young person's guide, and there's 8 percussion parts there, and we're just starting to put them together. And I love how the fact that Britain uses is this theme, and all the different families play it, but I actually can almost hear the theme in the percussion, and I think that's really pretty cool. Yeah, percussion, I pretty much say this is a sound, or as they say they like to keep under my radar screen, is that only when I stop and correct them that they know they've done anything wrong. And usually I just let them go. If I don't say anything, it's like, yep, you're doing exactly. Sometimes they will ask me what kind of mallet you want, and I will say, please give me my possibilities, and I'll usually use it, decide by the sound that I want for that particular piece.
Well, it's like a good director that says, "I'm going to allow a little bit of improv and see what you do, and then we'll go from there." So I like that. You let the musicians. You probably feel
Yeah.
more comfortable too. They get to be themselves, and they're not so uptight. They're like, "I don't want to mess up." They're like, "Let's just have some fun with this and see what we can do." So I love your style.
Okay, well, I mean, you do get some. I do have to be true to
Yeah.
the composer, but usually, I think I guess I respect the musicians enough to say, "Tell me what you think, and I'll let you know if I like it." So.
We mentioned Secco. We mentioned Cheshire Symphony Orchestra. Another one I want to talk about is chamber music by the river.
It's one of my favorite babies. Um, my husband and I have a beautiful home on the Connecticut River. So it's chamber music by the river because, well, let's say it's by the river and it's chamber music. So I had started up I had been hired to do a program called the National Woodwind Ensemble, and was a wonderful group. It was actually part of Elder Hostel, and it was a bunch of seasoned musicians who came together for a whole week, and they learned how to play chamber music, and then they would have a concert at the end, and it was a live-in experience. That was a great market for those people who wanted to do it, but slowly it was a little harder and harder and harder to convince people to come to this thing when they had never heard of it before. And I also moved to Connecticut, and about that time I said, well, a lot of musicians cannot amateur dedicate a whole week to playing music. They have jobs, full-time jobs, and they can't always just take a week off to play. And so I said, let's start up a weekend program. And my strength is woodwind quintets. I'm a horn player, which lovely because I can play brass quintets and woodwind quintets. And so I started out a program where I would have 2 woodwind quintets, and then I would bring everyone together to a decade or a double woodwind quintet. And then I brought on a partner named Kathy Giampetro, and she's an oboist in the chamber ensemble extraordinaire. And we did programs, and we would bring 15, we would expand it because now we had 2 of us, 15 musicians, or 3 flutes, 3 oboes, 3 clarinets, 3 horns, 3 bassoons. And while I was working with a double woodwind quintet, she would be working with the quintets, and then we would rotate and all the quintets and take 15 musicians together on a Saturday morning. And by Sunday at 3 o'clock, we did a performance.
Wow.
So it was really, it was a great program. And we probably did 4 of these a year. And then COVID happened.
Mm.
And the problem with the program, somebody gets sick is that you have this integral 15, you have 3 quintets, and if one person pulls out, then you're missing that, but then you're also missing one of the decades. And then can you get somebody at last minute that's at the same quality that you had, because this is actually pretty hard music, and to come in at the last minute. And so the weekend long program has become a more flexible program while we're dealing with how to deal with people being sick and contagious. And so now, instead of having a performance, we're doing a 1-day program where 15 musicians come in, we read all the quintets together, we'll separate. And without the performance or demands of that, we've actually been able to do more teaching. And actually, some of the musicians actually prefer that, because they don't have the nervousness of performing woodwind quintet or any kind of chamber ensemble. You have to really know your music well, and you have to have nerves of steel, because you mess up, you can't hide. So the new format is just 1 day or Saturday. They work really hard, and it becomes more teaching. And we have one on April 15th, and we have one on May 20th. And we're starting to have to turn away people, which is sad, but I can't have too many people. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's a lot of fellowship and eating involved, because of course we have a reception at the end. But I have a lot of people who just continually come. I have come to every single one of them, and we're trying to get more of a diverse group so that we're not just seeing the same 15, but it's also comforting to see the same 15. So
yeah, as I mentioned before, I said seems like there's a lot of longevity with a lot of the symphonies I spoke with, like 35 years, 20 years, 15 years. So if somebody was interested in being a part of this, do they reach out to you?
Yep. Yeah. They can just reach out to my website. It's just HilarieClarkMoore.com, or my email address, which I think you'll get later anyway.
Yeah, we definitely will. So let's go back to Hilarie Clark Moore, the early years.
Oh, fun days.
Sit back. It's going to be a wild ride. Mm-hmm. When did your interest in music begin, and what's your first memory?
Not a memory. I guess it's a memory that will embarrass me, but I figured it'll make it more entertaining for you. I was in a family where music was focused on. It was a high priority. I was given a lot of opportunities to go to and hear great different symphonies and classical music. So I think the story goes that the Warsaw Philharmonic came in and had a concert in our New London County in Connecticut. And I must have been very young. I'm hoping so, because I hope I wasn't old enough to know any better. So at a young age, when you're taken to a concert, and I was put in the balcony, and I did not understand that this wasn't a participating type event. You go into a concert, there's going to be music, and I had a whistle confiscated into my jacket pocket. So I got it out, and I started blowing it, and my parents were quick to take it out of my hands. And maybe they should have thought that I wanted to participate more than be an audience member at that point. And again, I'm hoping that was a really young age, and that I didn't know any better. I do remember playing the trumpet. I was 5 years old, before kindergarten, around that time, and getting it for $20 at our local church tag sale, and spending $20 to fix it up. I do remember that. And then I remember piano coming, and then I thought, oh, violin would be nice. And then I said, oh, horn would be nice. And and then I stopped adding instruments, which is good. I was, I did school, but most of my evenings and afternoons were going to lessons or going to rehearsals throughout my junior high and high school. And then I pursued a performance degree in the French horn. I laugh because during my COVID time at home, I brought out my violin, and I realized that I was a really good violinist as a kid, but I chose the horn. And the funny reason is because I was actually shy, And I thought the violinists were just too close to the audience. And I was the edge, like you're playing, outer edge of the violins. There was the orchestra, there was the audience there. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to play horn where I could contribute, but I would be in the back of the orchestra and no one could see me. And the funny thing is to have me being a conductor today, having to make the walk out there, do all the bows, and then show my back for the entire concert. So that's the ironic thing. I graduated quickly from University of Connecticut, and I was given some bad advice by someone who meant a lot to me, who was a mentor of mine of sorts. And he said, freelancing on the French horn isn't good for marriages. And what he should have said, it's not good for bad marriages. And I was engaged, and I took this to heart. I was like, okay. And so I made a decision. It wasn't a bad decision, but to go into academia or music theory. I thought, I'm good at this. Let me do that. And I think that was an interesting decision because I've always been balancing the performance part and the academia. And in a way, by doing both of them, I kept going back and forth, where am I going to go, that eventually the conducting actually made sense. Because you need to understand as a conductor what it is to be a musician. You need to know how to prepare them and what are their needs. But you also have to have the academia. You need to understand the music theory. You need to understand the music history as you prepare your scores. So I did not expect to become a conductor, but I can see how I landed there. So.
What impresses me, you said you were playing trumpet at 5 years old. Was it something that your mother or father said, you should try playing an instrument? Or did you come up and say, I would love to do an instrument? Like at that age, was it their idea to trying to give you a hobby, or you had the interest first?
I'm the one that made them buy them.
Wow.
I was the one that
impressive.
made them buy me a trumpet.
Wow.
Yeah. I also think it's very good if you want any encouragement on why you should play music, is if you say you have to practice, you get out of chores in the family. You don't have to do dishes. You all of a sudden, I have to go practice anytime that there has to be dishes done. And my siblings will still complain about that to this day.
An inspiring lesson to all you children watching the show right now.
Yeah, you definitely can use it.
Pick up an instrument.
On the other hand, I didn't watch any cartoons Saturday morning because I had to practice before I could do anything, quote, fun. But I also, there's nothing else I would have done. So music was it for me. And the lessons that you learn, whether playing with other kids or other musicians and working together, that's invaluable.
So what kind of music did you grow up listening to?
That's really fun. I am terrible in that I don't know any popular culture because it wasn't part of my upbringing. My father was a veterinarian and was not a musician, but he actually would choose music to soothe his animals after surgery. It would literally, and veterinarians do go home at night, and if you have an animal that stays over, they could get anxious in the night, or you leave the light on, or you leave classical music playing. And so it was interesting. He was actually the one that introduced me to 20th century music, so many years ago. So I don't think I would have been exposed as much if it wasn't for my father. My mother played a lot of instruments, even though she came from the Depression. And she was the greatest sight reader of all. And I don't think I'm as good at, I think they're better sight readers, but it is a good skill to have.
Wow, that is impressive. For me, my father was more the classic rock guy, like the Doors, Zeppelin, things like that. My mother was more the pop-oriented person. Yeah. She introduced me to Carpenters, Barry Manilow, things like that. So I had a good round. And for me, the gateway to classical music was movie soundtracks. John Williams. Yeah. My brothers and I would buy Jaws. My other brother would buy Close Encounters. My other other brother would buy Star Wars, and we'd go back and forth, and we'd buy all through the 70s, we'd buy all different soundtracks. So I think that's where my love of classical music came from. Then as I got older, I started realizing, as we mentioned, Tchaikovsky, Mozart, Beethoven, Vivaldi, Mahler. And I always love, and I say this to a lot of musicians I talk to, when people say, "Oh, classical music is boring." I said, watch a movie and watch it without music and tell me how boring classical music is. To me, it has so much power. I just love watching a live symphony, and it's full of life. And I'm not pulling out whistles, but I'm getting into it.
Well, it's Cheshire Symphony Orchestra. Is last concert of the season is on movie themes and soundtracks. And right before it was coming, I need to write a conductor's note in the program, and I need to start doing it now. And I was looking up what would movies be without music, and so that's where my spin of what I'm going to do. But it was interesting that I was, you just can't imagine. You have Rocky doing Rocky in his training going up those steps without some kind of music behind it. Or you have an epic hero and good wins all over bad, and you don't have some kind of triumphant thing at the end. You just can't imagine what music would be, what movies would be out without music. And whatever style of music you like, or however you got into it, it's just the fact that I think you need music in movies, but you need music in life.
Exactly. Perfectly said. The other day, I went to the Palace Theater, and they were showing E.T., and they had the Waterbury Orchestra Symphony play the music while the movie was on. I loved it. Every time they have a movie, I don't even care what it is. I just want to see the symphony play with the movie. That's how much I enjoyed it.
Yeah. I think that's starting to be more of a path that we're doing. I know the Cheshire Symphony Orchestra did this story, The Snowman, and you can have people read the stories. Didn't have the money to do the actual movie, but I mean, it was just wonderful because people could actually read the book and see the orchestra playing. And I think it's great to do that. And I mean, even silent movies, you had some kind of organist playing music behind there. Even TV or anything of our entertainment, if you're out of the room, something scary is happening. You just can hear it. So I can't imagine any of our entertainment without music.
Well, that's why I tell people, I said, it's not the movie that really makes you cry or get scared. It's the music. The music is the one that helps you with the emotions. And speaking of silent movies, I'm sure you know what Real Artways is in Hartford. Did you ever hear
so much? No, go tell me more.
Okay, no, it's a great place. They show more independent movies, foreign movies, but they also have an art gallery as well. So and they have different things. So the reason I bring it up is I saw a Buster Keaton movie, and they had one person playing the music to the movie. And when you brought up the silent movie, that's what made me think of it, because back then they would have the words on the screen, but it was all music, and that was it.
Here comes the train.
So how old were you when you decided that, hey, this is what I want to do for a living?
There was a step where my father was a veterinarian, and I thought maybe I should go into the family business. I think I mentioned in other interviews but then I took a step back and said, hey, I'm smart. I like biology, but I really don't want to learn bones. I don't want to learn the diseases. And it's hard today, being a more seasoned musician, talking to a young person, and they'll say, oh, I want to be a musician. And I mean, the reality is it's hard. It's really hard, to make a living at it. I think there's a lot of people who can go into music, and then there's employment within the musical field. Maybe that's not exactly what they were doing, but there's so many other things to do. But I think I could have done a lot of things, but I just didn't have the passion for anything else. I think it was probably my senior year, particularly, and I had a choice of taking physics or being the pianist for the chorus. And I was like, I probably am never going to use physics. So it was an easy thing. Maybe I should have taken it, but I enjoyed myself, and it was what I should have been doing. Yeah.
Well, I think I'm speaking for a lot of people when they say this. We're glad you didn't do that. We're glad you stuck with music.
Yeah, thank you.
We love what you're doing right now. Well, did you go to school for music?
Yeah, I went to University of Connecticut as a performance major in French horn. I had a lot of music theory. I had some piano under me, but I only stayed for 3 years because I graduated because I had all those advanced credits, and then I moved on to Yale and pursued a music theory degree there.
Wow.
So.
I mean, that's pretty impressive to get into Yale. So
Well, there's a story if you want to be even more embarrassing.
I love embarrassing.
So I wanted to get my master's. I want to get my master's in music theory. And but my father said I should go and get my PhD instead, just go right for it. And I said, no, I really want to go to master's. And we had an argument about it. And so I decided the one way that I could keep in my dad's good graces was to apply to the one school that I knew would turn me down for the PhD. So I applied to Yale. And so then my plan was they would turn me down and say, hey, Dad, I tried, I have to go get my master's. Well, at the time, the head of the department, that was Craig Wright, Wright. And I got a phone call and my roommate told me that Mr. Wright was on the phone. And of course, I made a wisecrack when I got on the phone, which was probably not the best first step impression. And not only did he accept me to Yale for PhD, but he gave me a full scholarship.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, my path was decided for me. I couldn't turn it down. And right, you're like, oh, poor Hilarie. I'm like, okay. But I was really very, very young. A lot of people had already had Fulbright scholarships. They had masters, and I was coming in with 3 years of college experience, not much writing skills. Didn't have my languages at that time. You had to pass your German, and you had one other language, and French. And frankly, I had never failed anything before. And all of a sudden, here I'm at Yale. I'm going, oh. And I started failing some things. But I also went over to the School of Music and continued to play, and I continued to freelance, which was also helpful. And I get through like 2/3 of the semester, and I call up my mother and say, I can't do this anymore. It's too hard. My mother go, well, it's paid for. You might as well finish the semester. So I would finish the semester, and then I would get my grades, and they were like, these are actually pretty good. I guess I have to continue. And then that happened for 4 semesters. I would want to quit 2/3 away, and then pass the qualifying exams. And then the best part was I got to teach. And I got to teach, music and theory. And of course, you have all the different ear trainings and everything else. And all of a sudden, I excelled at that because I could understand and I could relate, and I could find different ways of teaching for those that struggling at Yale is a little bit, those who needed a little extra help. And I excelled, and I was still playing in, some of the groups in the School of Music. In fact, the story is I played Rite of Spring, the last horn, 1 week before my due date of my first baby. I really was continuing to play. And I remember Alan Ford, who is a well-known theorist, saying, well, at least, what Hilarie has going for her is at least she's musical. And I was like, well, isn't that the point? I mean, everything else can be learned. We can always study. We can always keep studying those languages and everything else. But isn't the point is that we're musical? So I do have a Yale degree. And then I continue to, I was moved around a little bit through family and situation, and never got that full-time position, but I enjoyed what I did, and it was an interesting path for me. So
yeah. It's definitely interesting. That's a great story.
Well, I mean, Yale's tough. I mean, and I was 21. I was 21 going after my PhD. I mean, it takes a while. I wrote about Brahms and his orchestration. And that was actually never done. And we didn't have the technology, but I was talking, it's all right, I won't go into it. But, you know, to talk about orchestration in a music dissertation or theory dissertation was amazing. And again, orchestration, maybe she should go into conducting too,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
No, feel free to go into any avenue you want. I just love your passion. I can just tell you have a passion for this. And so whatever avenue you want to go down, I'll just sit here and listen because I'm enjoying this. This is
I think only one or two people have read my dissertation since I wrote it, so it's fine. It's out there. It's out there.
So how long after you graduated did you become an adjunct professor?
Well, I finished my dissertation in Switzerland with a mother of one. And my husband moved me there, and that was an interesting experience. And I actually had to use my German a little bit. And then my husband and I moved to Hawaii. A little bit 170 degrees around the world. And our second daughter was born in Hawaii. And again, because the transit nature of it, it's difficult to do it. I did a little substituting on the horn with the Honolulu Symphony Orchestra. I played a little bit in Switzerland on the horn. But I did a little teaching at a private school in Hawaii. And for whatever reason, I became a chorus conductor and organist at a church. That was an interesting experience to not swear because I can't put the right feet down on the right pedals because I was not an organist. So I did those things, and they were like, well, you had no experience. I was like, but they needed somebody, so I did it. And then we came back to New York, and that's when I started the Student Orange for 20 years. And it was probably January of 1997 when I started up the chamber ensemble and the orchestras, and that's when I started conducting. And just 8 years ago, I moved back to Connecticut, and I went back to New York to conduct 1 day a week, and then I added an orchestra, and then eventually that trip was getting a little bit too long. And I needed a new challenge. That orchestra had been grown up, and I thought, let's do something similar in Connecticut. So
you're like a worldwide sensation. I love this. You've been everywhere. Switzerland, Hawaii.
Well, I mean, the cultures are very different. Switzerland is rule oriented, and Hawaii is a little bit more laid back, and just wonderful learning experiences. We were two kids from Connecticut, really never been away from home too much, and just to learn that different isn't wrong in a different culture. And we were in Switzerland when Iraq invaded Kuwait. We were there when the American women's leagues would say, hey, don't look American. I'm thinking college sweatshirt, jeans, sneakers. It's hard not to look like an American. And then Hawaii was the total opposite. Just beautiful. Well, both places beautiful. Just a little, all really laid back, and it was like rules laid back.
Yeah,
like
surfer dude.
Yeah, and then we eventually came back. So
and the rest is history. So, in teaching, what genres of music do you teach
now,
I guess we'll start back. We'll work our way up to now. So back then, what were you teaching?
I would say my strength was music theory, but you have the lecture part, you have the keyboard part, you have the dictation part, you have the sight singing. So that would be quite a bit of teaching. Then you have different levels of music history, whether you're just doing the just a survey kind of course for non-musicians, or the more in-depth study of music history with music majors. Mm-hmm. I taught class piano, and that was fun because community college, you get very interesting students, and it really was fun. I mean, it was challenging. And I had one retired detective, and he told me that taking one of my tests on the piano was scarier than going into a building that he knew he was going to be shot at. I looked at him like, oh man, you're taking music way too seriously here. I was considered tough but fair, you know. Um, I also taught history of jazz, which I learned a lot about jazz. It was not my genre growing up.
Mhm.
But usually, and then the chamber ensemble and the orchestra. So I really taught a lot of different things in music. Um, Music history would have been my strength, and then obviously the performing orchestra and chamber ensembles.
Yeah. I'm just like with classical, I'm not a connoisseur of jazz, but I
Mhm.
enjoy jazz immensely. Like I've been to Newport Jazz Festival, the Hartford one every year. There's other ones, the Litchfield Jazz Festival. Wherever I can see some good music, I'll go to clubs in New York sometimes. I just enjoy listening. I mean, obviously, I'm just going to name some big names like Buddy Rich. I just love listening.
Yeah.
And so I just love the fact that it's just like me. It's like you have so many different types of music that you love. And I think that makes you more well-rounded in like what you do, especially for what you do. It makes you more well-rounded and a better teacher because you can take something from each one.
Mhm. Well, I'm also actually looking for what does the student need and what's their love and how can you teach
Yeah.
the music and make sure it's applicable. And I got to sort of correct something is my father-in-law was actually a jazz musician. And he just laughed his head off when he heard that I was teaching jazz. Um, he was just like, what? And then again, he was the kind that could just improvise
Yeah.
and not read music on the piano, and here's me with my music. And so the jazz history wasn't my best teaching, but I filled in when needed and I learned a lot that semester. So
Well, it's similar to that quote you said that I read in the intro. It's not enough to understand music theory in theory, but to play it, sing it,
yeah.
learn it from all music. It's similar to when I went to Connecticut School of Broadcasting in the 90s. It's learn by
Mhm.
doing. The only way, I mean, I can be told, oh, this is what it's going to be like if you when you get to a real radio station, this is what you will do. At the station, that you would actually put on your own radio show for people. So I love the fact that that's how
Yeah.
you teach. Is the only way you can really learn is not by reading about it, but by doing it.
Yeah, well, it has to be practical, it has to be applicable. And so if these musicians want to play in this ensemble, why is this knowledge important to them? Or if they're going to become music educators, boy, you better know when a mistake is wrong and why.
Mhm.
So you need those ears, and maybe the piece that you got is too hard, or maybe you don't have the instrumentation, so you need to rewrite it for the group that you have. It's practical skills. So
Well, a dream of yours growing up, or maybe when you get
mhm,
older, was always to compose. So in
mhm.
2014, as I mentioned in the intro, you began writing what would be called Fishergirl. So I want to talk about that. First of all, I want to mention something because what impresses me about composing, I want to get your opinion because you actually do it. I'm so impressed when I'm going to use John Williams as an example because I just saw something on him. And I love the fact he's looking at it. And when he's writing music on the piano, he's like, all right, I want the oboes to play this. I want the flutes to play this. The violins will play here. So when we'll start with Fisher. When you're doing that, did you have the same mentality?
Well, I had a great orchestrator who was also my conducting teacher, Ron DeFacey, and he really made orchestration that popped. It is my future dream of actually hearing and playing and thinking about the orchestration and actually doing something for an orchestra, but I'm not at that stage. I'm still, here's the harmonies, and I have written some horn quartets, a horn quartet and a horn sonata, but again, horn and piano are something that I know really well. So I have written the Fishergirl, which is it's a long show and it's great, but I cannot take the credit for the orchestration. But the orchestration is phenomenal in it, and I'll just go about the orchestration a little bit to give you an idea. Is the Fishergirl has 3 geographic differences and starts in Castine, Maine, and then goes to Washington D.C. and ends up in New Orleans. And Ron used a harpsichord sound for the casting, and because there's some history of different areas, and it has a little mystery because there's a mystery part of it. And then the piano sound when he got to DC because it's high society. And then he used a honky tonk piano, or actually he took 2 electric pianos and he tuned them a 4th part, so you get the sound of that old honky tonk. I mean, just some of those kind of things. I have a piece called Train Ramblings, where where I live, I'm right next to the Essex steam train. It's a steam train that goes up and down with steam. And there's certain days when you can pay to be the engineer, and they do the whistle all day. And so in my show, all the principals go from DC by train to New Orleans, and the chorus makes sounds of the train. And I listened a lot to the train and did some research, and made melodies that sound on the train. And this song called Train Ramblings has all the principals sort of doing that daydreaming. What do you think about if you went on a train or a plane, what are all the other people thinking about? And so it's really neat, but the orchestration is really cool about that. So I think what's different or unique about my composing is I've been watching people, and maybe I'm overly sensitive or highly sensitive or very empathetic. And I think what I chart out more would be the emotional, or how emotions change, and how would this feel? I mean, not basically happy, or whether you've been or lovey or something like that, but it's again, what does that emotion sound like? And again, being a theorist, yeah, I know how Mozart would have written something, but now I'm combining chords a little bit, and the style is considered neo-romantic, very melodic, very harmonic. It has dissonances, but it's still something that you could sing by, but the sounds are a little bit different. And but I think charting out the emotional path of whatever's going on in the event, and thinking about what does that sound like, and using those chromatic chords, or those lush chords, or those open chords, or or just kind of to make different sounds, emotions.
Yeah, well, it's funny you said that. You mentioned the train, because I watched a documentary. It was called Score. It was all about composers trying to come up with different ideas for the movie score. So they had Hans Zimmer, Danny Elfman, John Williams, all these different composers, and they were showing some of them. One composer, I can't remember which one, was outside on his roof recording the wind, the way it hit the shingles, and he goes, "This is such a great sound. I got to find a place to put this in the movie." So I love the fact that you were doing that too, coming up like, where can I come up with different sounds and ideas? And I just love how creative these composers get, including yourself.
Yeah. So yeah, it's fun. And I mean, I live by the water. I love water. I love sailing. I love swimming. And it's, the story starts out in Castine, Maine, where technology in the early 1900s is changing for the fishermen. But I mean, you have lumbermen, and what would be the sound of the fisherman kind of thing versus lumberman, and it's just so neat. Anyway.
Yeah. All right. Well, first, before we get into the Fishergirl, what it's about, I want to talk about your creative team. You mentioned Ron DeFessi, then you also have Gwen Gunn, and
Yes.
I might get her name incorrectly, but
Just say
Zoe
Zoe.
Savali.
Zoe Savali, yeah. Yeah, it's the story of this is, you come up and say, "Oh, great, I'm going to start composing. How am I going to do that?" So I'm going back from Connecticut to have conducting lessons with Ron. I took lessons with him for 20 years, and I'd be conducting, and our lessons went on more than an hour. I don't, it was till the brains were tired. But at the end of the lesson, I would say, "Hey, I'm thinking about writing, listening. I'm doing something here. I'm not quite sure what it is, but can you listen to this?" And eventually, and he'd be there, and he would actually say, "Wow, it's, I don't think I actually got a compliment, but it was worthy enough for him to look at it." And then he would make some suggestions. Well, interestingly enough, Zoe was the person who took the next lesson, and she was taking lessons as a mezzo soprano. No, sorry, an alto. And she was coming in, and because our lessons always ran hours and you don't really know when the next lesson's going to start, she'd be sitting there and listening. And she was also a friend of mine, and she was like, "Hey, Hilarie, what you doing?" And Ron was like, "Oh, why don't you listen to this?" And go, "That's interesting." So that happened for a couple of years when I was just by myself thinking about this. I had sort of a story in line. I wasn't ready to fess up that I was got this big, large work. And eventually they're like, well, is this a song cycle or what? And I just kept bringing more pieces, and the two of them, we just had a candid conversation. I said, this is what I'm doing. Do you want to get on the boat or not? And they actually both said yes. And I remember saying, Ron, do you want to do this, or that? And he's like, all of it. I was like, all right. So we started, but we needed somebody to write a dialogue. And here in Connecticut, I through a couple different connections, I met Gwen Gunn, and phenomenal person. She in the 1970s was writing feminist plays in Connecticut, which would have been a little bit of a challenge. And she was married to Moses Gunn, who is actor, and she's a playwright and she's a poet and just really an interesting person. And we hit it off really well. And she was also really good in pushing me. Actually, the entire creative team was very good about pushing me out of my comfort zone. Gwen, particularly on gender issues. And again, Ron had to work with 3 females. And once in a while, we'd have a discussion, and we're like, yep. We talk about our heroine, Danny Trescott, was brought up in Castine, Maine, and her father was a fisherman, and she wants to be a fisherman, and father dies, and she has to find a different life. And he's like, well, geez, why couldn't she have been a fisherman? I'm like, it's the early 1900s, Ron. Do you not understand that certain avenues were not open to women at the time? Yeah, being a secretary, church teacher, and nurse. There was just not a fisherman in Castine, Maine at that time. So he had to deal with 3 females.
So you mentioned, that's what I want to talk about. So you mentioned the protagonist's name is Danny. She wants to be a fisherman. And where's the rest of the story go?
I will give you my 30-second elevator speech.
Let's hear it.
That Zoe actually wrote, not me, because Danny Trescott, the daughter of a Maine fisherman, faces significant trials as she steers through dangerous straits to find her true course in life. Although Danny's story takes place in the early 1900s, she is a modern era every woman facing the same issues most women, if not all people, encounter today. As she navigates the treacheries of gender bias, class distinction, greed, mental illness, and violence, her challenges in finding her path in life are universal and ageless. She finds truth, love, and family by trusting her heart and choosing to look past discrimination and slander.
Bravo.
Yay!
Bravo. I love it. It's a mouthful. But all right.
Well, you can't imagine how couple sentences you would have actually tweaked a million times, but that's our ending story.
Well, no, I love it. So where'd the inspiration for this come from then?
I think, I talk about 3 different sources. The story is early 1900s. Unfortunately, we have not learned much. You had the Spanish-American War, which was, let's just say, some fake news got us into that situation. Mm-hmm. And there's still an issue of having change. No one likes to deal with change. The technology was changing. Mm-hmm. You have, again, got to understand, when I was writing this, we still have discrimination. But if I could put in a universal thing, we really don't know everyone. We don't know who other people are. And I like, it doesn't matter, race, color, religion, blah, 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 all gender, everything is. And so, I have signs like, see past the mask we wear. And you're like, oh, that's a COVID reference. Well, no, I'm talking about, see past the jobs we do, fishermen, lumbermen, or see past who we are to really see us. So it is that kind of a story. The story it is unique. So we have those issues. So in the last couple of years, I've been watching social society issues. And I've got to say that, some of the strong songs got strength, the messages of the songs got strengthened with some of the things that have been happening in our country for the last couple of years. I actually have it's one of my favorite songs. It's the last song that I composed, of A River's Journey. And it's the spirit of a grandmother telling her granddaughter, follow your path. But it does make reference to the fact that she had been in the Civil War, and it talks about slavery, but there's a wonderful line, I'm hoping the waters are no longer bloody. And unfortunately, we still are in this situation. So there is some social issues. So social issues would be number one. Number two, I just absolutely love water. So there's a lot of water imagery. Even if you read my elevator speech, through dangerous straits, of course, it's all water. I'm on the water. I love it. There's a lot of water, obviously, in Castine. And then there's a historical aspect of it. There's a backstory of the Civil War in New Orleans, and also in Maine at that time period. It was the first time that you were starting to get rusticators, which would have been people from out of the state or tourists coming into their state. And they're now demanding changes. And these are people that would have stayed for like a month for the summer months. And all of a sudden they want food that's considered common or low man's fare, which would have been lobster. But my husband's family were actually rusticators in Castine, Maine. And he also had a relative that served not in Maine, but in Connecticut Regiment, who ended up in New Orleans in the Civil War. So I had some interesting family artifacts to use. So again, 3 different geography and using some history involved as well. So history, family history, water, and society. I think that's good.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I love the fact that you know your family history. I would love to know where my family comes from. So it sounds like you have historical artifacts, letters from that time period.
Yeah, actually, I'm blessed to have a lot of paperwork of my family as well. But my husband's family, he's now has boxes of stuff, and it's he has deeds that are from before the Revolutionary War here in Chester,
Wow.
Connecticut. And, he has to figure out what's the appropriate place for it. I particularly like to read the Civil War letters that he has, because his grandfather, great-grandfather, was actually a fife player. He was an actual musician. And, I learned a lot through the letters, like the musicians would actually be at the end of the rank, and they would actually be responsible for burying the dead. And so he has a letter talking about, he was just really upset about how they were burying the dead without respect. And there's also a really interesting thing, and again, I don't know if it's historically important, but he was in a hospital for a very long time, and the ladies would wear bonnets, and sometimes they would have red, white, and blue, and that would mean that that the woman favored the North. But if they had a red and a white, or I think you were a secessionist, and so it was just one way for women, again, women's rights, to show I actually have a political statement. I mean, I don't know if it was all that much different from the Queen of England having different brooches, has significance. But again, I don't know if it has any historical, significance. But I couldn't weave it into my Fishergirl, but if I could have, I would have.
Yeah, no, I love that. So they always say, write what you know. And,
yeah.
So the question is did you write the music first and then send it over to Gwen and Zoe and Ron, and then they would work on the orchestration and the lyrics?
It was actually I had many of the songs 85% done, but I don't like words. I would be more of a mathematician than the person who writes words. And I love the music. So the accents and words always needed to be corrected. And so Zoe and Ron would work on that. And also they both had the singing experience to make sure that, the voice parts were really showcase the voices of the singers. And with Zoe, I had the story, and I would write, well, this is what I think they should say, and now fix it and put it in your words and make it good. so, so I get credit for the story, because here's the story, and here's the dialogue, and just fix it. And but this is sort of what I want to happen in the scene, and you need to use this phrase because I'm going to use it in a song or something like that. So it was, everyone had a say in it. And I remember COVID happened, everything shut down. I couldn't conduct, I couldn't really teach, all that kind of stuff. And I remember calling Ron and saying, let's really do this Fishergirl. And again, it's the Fishergirl, but let's really do this work. And I think it actually became our life, saver, because what do you do with creative people when they can't create? And there was one time where you still had COVID, and it was warm enough. It was like September. It's probably September, and we worked outside in the porch, 10 feet apart. We didn't know. No. And, we actually went through and we acted out, we sang the parts, and we did the whole thing. But, we did what we could. We had Zoom meetings. And then, you have the technology. Here's the score going by. You can share that score and the music, and we could talk that way. So, we talked a lot outside for a while and by Zoom.
Well, I interviewed a lot of musicians, and they said they got most of their writing done during that time period.
Yeah.
They wrote 2 or 3 albums worth of material, and they were able to stay busy because you said there's nothing else you could do. So it was definitely a horrible time for everybody, but definitely for people who make their living, playing in front of the public. So when you said you had 85% of it written, when you originally wrote it, did you write it on the piano?
Yes.
Okay.
I wish I could do it in my brain, but I am such an oral learner. I just do so many things by ear. And it's an interesting experience. There was one winter I had to actually write a song, and it's sung by a really evil guy, really, really, really bad guy. And I'm like, I'm a pretty nice person, and I have to write something evil. And by a couple weeks into it, all of a sudden, my husband would come around the corner and say, "Are you okay?" Because I would be like, and he was like, "All right, we're gonna leave her alone," and then, but all of a sudden you get certain chords, and I think originally I had problems writing a love song because I thought, oh, this would be too personal and people would see me in it. And I was like, well, yeah, okay, whatever. It's so, but there's also a song, it's a small little song. It's called A Simple Daisy, where a secondary character named Emma is a young lady, and she just wants to be seen for more than who she is. Everyone thinks I'm a simple daisy, but yet I'm a garden. I'm loyal lilies. I'm a rose with thorns and things like that. And I'm thinking, you know what? I'm the baby of my family. Really, isn't that what I'm saying? Is, please look at the youngest as, hey, we've grown up and we're not the baby of the family anymore. Please see us for who we are. So if you know me, a lot of the pieces are very, very personal. They have me in it, and some of them don't. Hopefully not the evil one, but So.
I like you actually turned into Jack Torrance.
Yeah, there's one. It's called the nation's best blueberry pie, because Mainers think that they have the best blueberries with the little blueberries, and it's the heroine Danny is at a table with her father, who she and her father had saved, the Secretary of Chamber Commerce and another person. And it's just how do you give thanks for saving your life? And then we're talking about, here's a fisherman so proud of his roots and so proud of his work. And then we have a politician from DC and different social stratus. And it really, it's a piece that says, why can't we just talk? We're all Americans. And I go, what's Hilarie saying? Why can't we talk? We're all Americans. I mean,
Yeah.
so, again, you've got some of my ideas thrown in.
I love it. Well, the song that I heard was My Beautiful Lily. How's that fit
Yeah.
into the story?
It's probably a song that doesn't need it, but it's the first song that I composed that I loved. So that's why I always put it in. My Beautiful Lily is a song by Danny's father, William Trescott. And he's asked the question, he's a widower, why does he not date? And his response is, because I'm still in love with my beautiful Lily. His wife was named Lily. And if you think about it, lilies, by the way, lilies are all over Castaigne, Maine, but lilies are plants and they're rooted in the ground. And he's a fisherman. And there's some wonderful analogies, fishing nets, I go out fishing and what pulls me back and is my love for my Lily. I'm still in love with my Lily. Now, there's a lot of people who have had the unfortunate situation of having a spouse or partner pass away, and they go and they're so lucky they find another love. But this is the song for the guy or anybody who has lost, and that's that one love that they're going to keep. And it sets up what our heroine is looking for, that she's looking for a love like her parents had, and sets up the family kind of a thing. But it's just a beautiful song. And it's the song that's most that singers have asked me, can I have that? Can I sing that song? And I'm still working on the copywriting and things like that. So that's the one song that people ask me for.
Yeah, I loved it. And I'm definitely looking forward to hearing the other songs because from what I was reading, this is a pretty long play.
Well, let's see. When we first did it, the development history is we did a workshop on it in March of last year. And we had everyone come to my music studio. We worked for 4 days, pianists, singers, chorus. I conducted it. It was fun. I got to go. And at the end, we performed it. And we got some feedback from family and friends, but of course, they're family and friends, so they said nice things. And then in June, we did an orchestra production of concert version with the Hudson Opera Theater with Ron conducting. And it was too long. Everyone's like, I love it, but, and I was like, yeah, but I have a lot to say. So from that June 11th, 12th weekend till the end of July, I actually cut 44 minutes. I like to say 45, but it's 44 minutes. And now it's 2 hours and 15 minutes of playing time. It's still long, but I have been told that that's actually the sweet spot. I mean, you said Tar was 2 hours and 40 minutes, so I'm not complaining about it. And while we were abbreviating it, I also strengthened some of the story and took out some of the tangents and the like. So yeah, I'm really pleased with the outcome. And then again, we're just going to get in hands, and I'm sure there will be additional tweaking. Actually, Gwen, I think, sent me yesterday a change of one line for the script yesterday. So obviously we're still thinking about it.
Yeah, you can always break it up into 2 parts.
Yeah, but then I would have to write more. Again, it really does hold people's attention, and so I'm not going to.
Yeah. Well, that's why I think that I love it. You should go with your heart. I mean, if you think it's, I mean, I personally don't think that that's too long. If I'm enjoying it, I don't want it to end. I love the music. I love the story. And then at the end, I'm disappointed because it's already over. I don't care how long it is.
Yep.
So I'm like you when it comes to, like, sometimes people say, oh, sometimes your interviews are too long. I've done an interview that lasted 5 hours one time. We just kept on talking and talking. I said, for me, the interview is over when we have nothing else to talk about. I don't plan on how long it's going to be. So I'm not going to say, well, we have a 30-minute spot here. Let's just record, because look, we've already been talking for almost an hour and a half. So I think
I have 5 hours in me, though. We had a basketball game yesterday, so I'm a little tired. So,
And I don't think this will last 5 hours, but
thank you.
I was bringing up the point. It's like, I'm not going to shorten my interviews just to make, because now people can, I mean, I know it's a little bit different in your field, especially with me, people can stop it, listen to it later. But I love the fact that you have so much material that, let's keep it going. And you're that creative, and you have those many ideas going on in your head. So So you talked about where it was performed and when it was performed. Do you have plans to expand the show to different venues and states?
Well, this is the thing. I have now had to jump into a whole nother field that I never thought I would have to do. I am so much more comfortable creating music or participating in it. And now I have to promote it. Yuck. And you have to talk to people and you have to, anyway, but I have been very, very fortunate to have people who have really been very generous with their time. And they have said, okay, I believe in the work, the Fishergirl. I really love it. Now, these are the people you need to get in contact with. And from the very beginning, we've been in contact with the artistic director, Nancy Rhodes at Compass New Opera Theater in Brooklyn. And she is a contact with Gwen, and she's interested in it. Actually, a director, Mark Kroon, in the Netherlands is interested in it.
Wow.
So I have people, but interested doesn't mean producing. And so last week I sent, I've been meeting with different people and they've been giving me different connections. And so I spent a lot of time following up with these connections, doing my background research on who are these people and would they be interested in the Fishergirl. And I get feedback almost every day that's positive. Someone says, I'm going to champion your work to such and such a group. And I go, oh, she said champion. I get so excited. So figuring out how to promote it, I've got the script, nice digital script. I've got a nice little presentation so that they can read about the development, all the creative team, and then they can push a button and listen to 5 different songs. It's going to happen. But again, I'm learning a whole new skill of, being in contact with people and actually talking about the Fishergirl. I mean, I could never have done this much talking 6 years ago. Yeah. But now, I mean, it's another passion. It's like, it's a really good story and it's really good. And I don't like dropping names, but I've got some really good people in the field who have experience and they've sung at Metropolitan Opera, they write for Opera News, they were on Broadway, and they've just been people have been very, very generous with their time. And again, I'm sure somebody had helped them earlier in their career and it's maybe payback, and I'm hopefully, we'll do the same. But it's great when you say, help me, and people do.
I love that. So right now you're talking different, like, for example, here's what I want to say. I want to go in this direction because I always say marketing is a completely different animal. You could have the talent, you could have this, and so for a while I did stand-up comedy, and I had my set down. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but getting people to come see the show, that was a completely different animal. So I definitely know what you're saying there, but it sounds like you have some, as you mentioned, some great connections. How did somebody from the Netherlands hear your stuff? Did you have people sending it out to them?
Actually, you have to use the connections that you have. Gone is friends with Mark Kroon, and I sent his materials, and he's been excited about it. And then he'll say, "Don't expect an answer from me because I'm doing this opera." I'm like, "Okay." And then 2 or 3 months or 4 months, he'll say, "Oh, and it's like, oh, I was just thinking about you." So we're getting closer. He now has a script in hand. He's got all the recordings of the songs. He just has to stop directing whatever he's doing and come back to me. So, yeah.
So do you have a timeline of when it might be out?
I have a possibility of next year.
Okay.
The problem is I also need to apply for some grants for that to happen. And then again, a grants administrator, that wasn't exactly what I wanted to do either in my life. And it's still very overwhelming. So I'm still, again, it's a hard business. Again, it's a new work. I think it's a great work, but it's not enough to bring in a couple hundred people. How do you tell people? So if you can give somebody some confidence of, hey, a certain percentage of the cost will be covered by grants, it's an easier sell.
Yeah.
So
I want to talk about some of your other works because I was going through and doing my research. One was called Going with the Flow. It's a 4-movement French quartet.
yeah.
And the other
Again,
one was, go ahead.
yeah. I was going to say it's another water-derived kind of thing. Is a lot about nature and stuff. That one is the most. It was just really interesting because I have I coach a horn ensemble. I haven't done it as much as I like to because we've gotten sort of busy. But again, I have my own lab. I play horn quartets with the horn ensemble. Sometimes we eventually can get to 8. I mean, during COVID, we actually had everyone out on the yard 10 feet apart, and it was the first. People were just excited.
Yeah.
But one of the songs I think it's about a waterfall, and I had just visited. My husband and I just visited our son who was out in Utah, and we did a lot of hiking all day. And again, he's near Salt Lake City, so you have the mountains. And I actually wrote the beginning, probably 20 measures on the airplane on the way back. And so that was the first measures that I actually didn't compose at the piano. But it's, again, I love water. So
Yes, I'm seeing a theme throughout this interview.
Yeah. And the horn sonata that you're going to talk about.
Yep, the day's rhythm.
That one's just sort of funny because it has, the beauty and of daybreak, and then day, and then twilight, and then night, and you can hear the how not chaotic, but how busy people are in the piece of this about the day, and then the calm before the storm, and twilight again is really peaceful, and night. I remember because I actually had Zoe around listen to it, and I said it. I'm like, I'm not sure. This one's a little bit different, and I said it's either, really like the activity of nocturnal animals, or it's somebody with insomnia. I mean, or it's like city life, but I mean, it's a very active kind of a nightlife kind of a piece, and it's called the Rhythms. I think the Day's Rhythms or something like that, and I will be working on copywriting them and getting them out to people to perform them in my next life, when I can sleep, sometime.
Well, how long are those?
They're probably 8 minutes a piece.
So you started the Fishergirl in 2014, and were these before that?
No, they were after.
They were after. Okay.
Again, it's a little bit of hurry up and wait. You do your productions, and you get so much work goes before the productions in the weeks, and then you wait for the recordings. Mm-hmm. And again, the people who are doing the recordings are busy and they have other lives, and then you wait some more.
Yeah.
And you go, wow, what can I do now? Because and you can't promote Fishergirl until you have the recordings and all that kind of stuff. So, and I thought that wouldn't it be nice to compose some music where I didn't have to worry about accents and words. So, and horn, and I really think I'll probably compose a lot. I'll do more horn stuff, and I'll probably will do some woodwind quintet. I've done a lot of arranging for woodwind quintet stuff, but I think it's liberating sometimes not to have the words.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about. I enjoy both, but I'm with you. I just loved listening to the music and the way it goes. So I definitely understand that. Did you ever have a point? It sounds like you're always creating, you're always thinking of something. Did you ever have a point where like, I really can't think of anything to write?
No.
Yeah.
Why would you do that? No, I mean, I right now, I actually have the next work, and I'm so impatient to spend time to do it. Yeah. And I'm busy with the creating and the conducting and the coaching, but this promoting Fishergirl takes time. Mm-hmm. And it's something that has to be done. Fishergirl, no one's going to come knocking on my door and say, I heard you have to really promote it. Yeah. But I do have the next work done. I have it outlined, and I'm really hoping that my summer months, or maybe even in May on, that I can spend more days. I used to protect Fridays and say, Friday is my creative day. Mm-hmm. This was before COVID. And then during COVID, every day is my creative day. And then I was like, oh, this is great, we're back. And then all of a sudden, because everything came back, it's just momentum, and you had to do all this work to get it to come back. And now I'm like, I want my creative days back. And I'm so you have to be careful with what you wish for. I want more time to compose. That was not an excuse to have COVID. Really, it wasn't. And so now I'm going to try to figure out the balance a little bit better, but definitely promoting Fishergirl, I'm going to get better at it, and I'm going to make some time. And the next work is going to be very interesting. So,
do you have any of these works recorded that people can listen to?
They can listen to the samples off of my website.
Yeah.
And anybody who I'm working on to promote it, or any production company, I give them everything.
All right.
All their works. Yeah.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to whatever is coming next. I definitely can't wait to see the Fishergirl when it's on the big stage.
I hope so.
Packed out crowd. I better get my tickets now before it's sold out.
It's one thing that I've been thinking about is there's been a trend about words. We've got rap, we have Hamilton, we have a lot of things, a lot of new musicals that are coming out, that I get to see the new musical, like new musical festivals. And they're very word oriented. And I'm so melody and harmonies. So it's sort of like the screenplay to your movies. You can tell what's happening. And so I have lyrics and they're beautiful and I have wonderful dialogue, but it's that pushback to the music where somebody could actually hum the song leaving the production. If they, and there will be people will get earworms and say, oh, I have Lily in my head and I can't get rid of it. And I'm like, well, that's a good thing. And so it's got to be a special market, because it's not going to be for the person who really likes the rap and the belting. It's back to that, those musicals or, operas. It is a hybrid between musical theater and opera. That person that really loves the melodies and the harmonies. So it's hopefully, I think it's universal stories and I think it's universal music, but it will have its own market.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing that and hearing anything else that you do. I'm so glad that I walked into that church back in November and said, check out this symphony. And it was great meeting you. I'm so glad that you are on the show, and keep up the great work. So before we go, though, I have one more question for you, and I promise you can get some rest. What's next, and where can people find you?
Where people can find me is, if you can spell Hilarie Clark Moore, HILARIE .Clark CLARK .Moore MOORE @gmail.com is my email address. You can reach me through my website, which is also HilarieClarkMoore.com. What's next for me? Get Fishergirl off the ground, continue the conducting chamber ensemble programs, and like I said, I have another large work that I'm working on.
Well, I'm definitely looking forward to that, and so much more. I'm going to have you on the show when that next big work is released.
Well, it'll be a couple of years.
Well, that wraps up the latest episode of the Claus Corner. A huge thanks goes out to orchestra conductor, freelance horn player, music theorist, music teacher, pianist, accompanist, arranger, and composer, Hilarie Clark Moore, for taking time out of her extremely busy schedule to be on the show. Another huge thanks goes out to editor extraordinaire John Bristol of Elmwood Productions for editing the show each and every week and making it available to all. I am also extremely grateful to Joseph Timothy Quirk and Rob Bull for all their hard work and dedication to make the show available on several Connecticut radio stations, as well as Spotify, iTunes, Amazon Music, Audible, and iHeartRadio. Thank you very much. And lastly, but definitely not least, I need to thank you, the viewer, for always tuning in. Enjoy your day, everyone.
Now available in one collection. Confessions of a Frenetic Mind. 5 tales of blood-curdling terror. Available on Amazon. Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
All of a sudden I hear, brim, brim.
What's a diaphragm again?
Ha! We caught one.
They're supposed to be weird.
Oh, yeah, no. If you say so.
I've always wanted to be in a movie.
Around for autumn,